Hello, boys and girls. We are now on chapter 6. The search continues of Who Are the Brothers Grimm. Children's and Household Tales was an immediate success. The arrival of the fairy tales gave the German people a renewed sense of pride in their country, just as the Grimms had hoped. All 900 copies of the book were sold within a few short months. Children read the fairy tales over and over, memorizing their favorites. Adults loved the book too, but some thought the fairy tales were too violent. One mother told William she refused to let her children read the book because of one story. In it, children are tricked into killing their friends. William adamantly defended the story. His own mother had told it to him as a child, and as a result, he played with his friends more carefully. I guess that's a good lesson. Their publisher immediately asked for more fairy tales. William began to travel to different towns to meet storytellers. He was amazed how famous the fairy tales had made him and Jacob. Storytellers all across Germany had heard of the brothers and were very willing to tell William their stories. One woman, Dorothea Wieman, lived in a village on the outskirts of Kassel. William was amazed at how clearly and precisely she told stories. Dorothea would tell William a story and then slowly tell it again without changing a single word so he could write it down. William also traveled out into the countryside to meet the Haxthesen family. My German needs work. The Haxthesens loved German folklore. They sang old songs, told many folk tales, and even wore old-fashioned clothing. Their two daughters, Anna and Ludwine, told William 20 of the 70 stories he put in the second volume. While William worked to collect stories for their new book, Jacob began to worry about his job at the library. Napoleon was losing power. King Jerome was scared he would not be the ruler of Kassel for much longer. King Jerome ordered Jacob to pack up the palace's important books and works of art and ship them to France. This was very upsetting to Jacob. They were valuable works of German art and literature. He couldn't let the French have them. He tried to convince the king that none of it was worth taking, but he didn't succeed. The German treasures were sent to France. It seemed that the French would never leave Germany. But early one morning in October 1813, wagons and carriages rushed past the Grimm's home. Jacob woke to find the French fleeing town. The Germans were finally free. A month later, Tante Zimmer, the brothers' favorite aunt, returned to Kassel. Jacob and William joined the crowd dancing and celebrating in the street. A couple months later, Jacob became secretary to a German government official. Jacob made 2 trips to Paris to retrieve the very same books and paintings he had shipped to France. Oh. William became the secretary to the librarian in Kassel. Though his job was very boring, he was very busy editing the second volume of fairy tales. In the first volume, William had kept many of the stories just as they'd been told to him. But for the second book, he made the stories simpler and easier to understand. He even changed many of the original titles. Wow, this is a tough one. Rumpelstiltskin became Rumpelstiltskin, and Little Brother and Sister became Hansel and Gretel. In January 1815, William sent the second fairy tale volume to Jacob, who was now living in Vienna. Jacob did not like that the book was much thinner than the first. He was also upset that William had not included all of his footnotes. A footnote is an extra bit of helpful information, included at the bottom of a page in a book. Jacob's notes had been about the history of the fairy tales, but William wanted the second volume to be better suited for children, not scholars. The brothers must have worked through their differences because later that year, the second collection of 70 fairy tales was published with a few more of Jacob's footnotes included. Jacob lived in Vienna for almost 2 years. In April 1815, he received tragic news from William. Tante Zimmer, the brothers' aunt, had died. Her death had an enormous impact on the brothers. As soon as he could, Jacob returned home to Kassel. The brothers decided never to live apart again. Chapter 7 tomorrow.